James Pearson has made an ascent of Robbie Phillips's E10 7A route, What We Do in the Shadows, at Duntelchaig, Scotland. What We Do in the Shadows shares the same beginning as another of Robbie's routes, Nosferatu E8 6C. Then, where Nosferatu trends right, What We Do in the Shadows takes a more direct line through crimps to the top of the crag. Robbie made the first ascent of What We Do in the Shadows in October 2021 with Dave McLeod on belay, and then they switched places that same day and Dave made the second ascent. When we spoke to Robbie shortly after he made the first ascent, he described What We Do in the Shadows as the hardest piece of rock climbing that he'd ever done, saying, "I've climbed around 40 plus sport climbs in the 8C/plus bracket over the years, and not many of them took longer than a week, some of them a couple of days. This line required multiple months spread across autumn-winter 2020 and September-October 2021. If it had bolts, it would absolutely be solid 8C, but for me it was particularly tough as it really didn't suit my style. I'm an endurance climber and I like long pumpy climbs or vertical to slightly overhung face climbs. This was pure power endurance on a really steep wall. A tough 7A plus boulder leads you into bicep sapping undercuts and straight into another 7C plus boulder on savage crimps. Then I do a dead point dyno to the top." The second ascent of the route from Dave McLeod came somewhat unexpectedly as he was recovering from an injury to his elbow. He got on the route with the intention of using it as full practice, but ended up in the final section and decided to use a slightly different beater to Robbie, instead using some small crimps rather than the dyno to the final jug. Speaking about his own ascent of the route, Dave said, "It's been a couple of years since I did Mind Riot, since I've tried such a hard route, and very satisfying for it to go down faster than expected." James identified What We Do in the Shadows as a really solid contender for a flash attempt. With both Robbie and Dave having made their own videos about the route and the various sequences that were available, there was plenty of information out there for James to take a look at. James's partner Caro, an E10 climber in her own right, then went up to figure out the protection and scope out some of the lower moves. With all of that information in mind, James was ready to give the route a flash go. He climbed comfortably up until the first roof, where the steepness brought everything into focus. I made it through the first boulder, got the knee bar comfortably in place, important as you place all the gear from here, and even managed to reach up into the first of the undercuts, which is where all the hard moves start. Caro had told me this hold was weird and that the sequence to release the knee bar was awkward and powerful, but it felt so good in my hand I think I got a little ahead of myself. I tried to move before I was properly established, and before I knew it, the knee bar was slipping. I couldn't get back. I tried desperately to rescue the situation but felt like a beginner at the wall, with a jug in one hand but no control over any other limb. I was off before I'd even reached the real fight. Opportunities for a route like this don't come around often, and I'd blown mine before it had even begun. I pulled back on and climbed to the top. The holds felt great under my fingers and the moves well controlled. A bittersweet sensation to feel I'd been so close, but you never really know. James's second try was a different story. Despite finding the knee bar a little bit funky still, he managed to hold on, and whilst it wasn't a flash, he did climb E10 in 2 goes. Pretty good. James described this ascent as ground up, which is interesting because it highlights an ambiguity within the term. In the case of James's ascent, he fell off on his flash go, pulled back onto the route at that point, and then climbed to the top of the route. Another perspective is that in order for James's ascent to count as ground up, he would have had to have lowered to the ground after he fell off on his flash attempt. Regardless of individual perspectives, the important thing is that James has been clear and upfront about what happened and what he did. Either way, James has made an ascent of an E10 7A route in just 2 goes without top roping. And perhaps this is an ascent which simply doesn't fit into the terminology that we already have. Let us know what you think in the comments below.